The music was a physical thing, a thrumming bass that vibrated through the soles of my shoes and up into my bones. The lights weren't just bright, they were a kind of assault. Great sweeping arcs of color that sliced through the hazy air, catching the glitter on dresses and the sweat on brows. It was supposed to be a celebration, a graduation party for one of my daughter's friends, but it felt more like a siege on the senses, and all round me a wall of sound, dozens of conversations, blending into a single roaring hum punctuated by sharp braying laughs and the constant high-pitched clink of glasses, making toasts that felt emptier with each repetition. I was right in the thick of it, playing my part. I smiled, I nodded, I accepted a drink I didn't want from a man whose name I could barely remember. I made the right noises, though. How wonderful! And she must be so proud, all the while feeling like an actor who'd forgotten his lines, just mouthing the shapes of words. I was performing the role of the good parent, the supportive family friend, the reliable presence. It was a disguise I'd worn so long. It almost felt real, but every time I caught my own reflection in the dark glass of a window, I saw the strain around my eyes, the tightness of the smile that didn't quite reach them. And then I'd see her, my daughter. She was a splash of color on the other side of the room, talking animatedly with a group of her friends. She looked radiant. Truly, her hair was done. She wore a dress I hadn't seen before, and she held herself with a new kind of confidence. But there was a distance to it all. It was like watching a beautifully lit scene from a movie, but from outside the theater. Her laughter would ring out, clear and bright, but it seemed to cut off a second too soon, as if she remembered she was supposed to be laughing, and then stopped every time I tried to drift closer to catch her eye and share one of those silent parent-child moments. A raised eyebrow at a boring relative, a conspiratorial smile. She'd turn away, she'd focus intently on someone else, or suddenly find a reason to check her phone. But then it happened for one single suspended second. The crowd seemed to part just enough. She looked up from her phone, and her gaze, unfocused for a moment, swept across the room and landed directly on me. It wasn't a glance, it was a connection. Her face, which had been a mask of pleasant sociability, went completely still. Her eyes held mine, and in them I saw something fragile and questioning. It was a silent plea, or maybe a silent accusation, a question hanging in the air between us. Across the gulf of the dance floor and the noise, it was a question about all the unsaid things, all the postponed conversations, all the times I had chosen the easy path instead of the right one. And in that moment, I had no answer for her. I offered a weak, questioning smile, and just like that, the shutters came down. She looked away, and the moment was broken. The illusion of the party snapped back into place, but it felt thinner now, more fragile. The fracture came from something so small, so stupid. I'd finally maneuvered my way over to her group, drawn by some misguided parental instinct to be near her, to prove I was present. They were talking about college plans, about internships, about the terrifying and exciting future that lay ahead. One of her friends, a girl named Chloe with bright pink hair, was talking about a gap year, about traveling to South America to work with a conservation group. She was passionate, her hands flying everywhere, talking about how scared but thrilled she was, and I trying to be part of the conversation, trying to be the wise, calming father figure. Said it. I patted her on the shoulder and said, "Oh, that sounds like quite an adventure. But are you sure that's safe? A young girl all alone In a foreign country, maybe you should consider something a little more structured first. It was meant to be casual, thoughtless, the kind of bland, cautious advice adults give to feel useful. I saw the change in my daughter's face instantly. It wasn't a slow shift, it was like a switch had been flipped. The polite, engaged mask she'd been wearing for her friends just dissolved. It fell away, and what was left underneath was something so raw and honest it stole the air from my lungs. Her jaw tightened, her eyes, which had been sparkling with reflected party lights, went flat and dark. The conversation around us stuttered to a halt. Her friends sensed the shift in the atmosphere, the sudden drop in pressure. They awkwardly mumbled excuses and drifted away, leaving the two of us standing in a little island of silence amidst the roaring party. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low. It trembled, but not with weakness. It trembled with a force she was struggling to contain. It was firm, resolute, a little more structured. She repeated her words, dripping with a bitterness I had never heard from her before. Her eyes were glassy with tears. She was absolutely refusing to shed. She wouldn't give me that. She was holding onto her anger like a shield. And then she said it. The words didn't slice through the party noise. They obliterated it for me. Everything else just ceased to exist. You're just a cowardly fool. The sentence hung in the air between us, simple and devastating. And the craziest part, the most surreal thing, was that the party didn't stop. The crowd kept laughing. A few feet away, the music kept pounding. The bass, a dull throb against my skin. But the lights that had seemed so festive moments before now felt harsh and interrogating. They weren't illuminating a celebration, they were exposing me. They were shining directly on the truth she had just spoken, making it impossible to hide. After the words left her mouth, a strange silence descended over me. It was an internal silence, a vacuum. The sounds around me, music, the laughter, the clinking glass vessel, became muffled and distant, like I was hearing them from the bottom of a well. The vibrant colors of the party blurred into a smear of meaningless light. All I could hear was the frantic pounding rhythm of my own heartbeat, a drum of panic beating against my eardrums. My first instinct was pure animalistic defense. My mind scrambled for a response, for the right thing to say, to take it back, to explain it away. I wanted to say, "How dare you speak to me like that?" I wanted to list all the things I'd done for her, all the sacrifices, all the times I'd been there, but that impulse, that need to fight back, was instantly drowned by a tidal wave of shame so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. And with the shame came the realization it wasn't a slow dawning, it was a cruel, intimate clarity that arrived all at once. My mind flashed back, not to the big moments, but to the small ones. The time she tried to talk to me about her anxiety before a big test, and I told her she'd be fine instead of asking her why she was scared. The time she had a falling out with her best friend, and I suggested they'd probably make up soon instead of sitting with her in her sadness. The countless conversations I had avoided because they were messy or difficult or required me to admit my own shortcomings. The slow, quiet erosion of her trust in me, brick by brick over years. I saw it all with a horrifying new vision. I felt my body betraying the emotion my mouth couldn't form. My hands holding a half-empty glass began to tremble uncontrollably. I had to set the glass down on a nearby table before I dropped it. My throat tightened, making it impossible to speak, to even attempt a word. I just wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I wanted to disappear into the noise and the crowd and become anonymous again. And I understood with a sickening certainty that her anger wasn't really anger at all. It was just a reflection, a mirror held up to show me the pain I had caused by my absence, by my emotional cowardice, and then ignored for years. She didn't wait for a response. She saw the look on my face, the shame, the realization, and it seemed to be all the confirmation she needed. She turned on her heel, her dress swirling around her, and she walked away. She didn't run, she walked with a purpose, her head held high, and the space she left behind her was so silent, so profoundly empty, that not even the blaring music could ever hope to fill it. I just stood there frozen, a statue of regret under a glittering disco ball that spun mindlessly, scattering points of light across the walls and the faces of people who were still happily unaware I was the still point in a turning world. The party swirled around me, a river of joy and celebration. And I was a rock stuck in the middle, unable to move, and in that stillness the final understanding settled over me. The cowardice wasn't just about the things I hadn't done, the conversations I'd avoided. It was deeper than that. It was a refusal to face love in all its honest, difficult, and messy glory. I had chosen the easy fiction of being a good parent, one who provides, who shows up to the parties, who says the right things in public, over the hard truth of being a real father. A real father would have been brave enough for the hard conversations. A real father would have risked the confrontation, risked being wrong, risked the mess, because that's what love requires. I watched her silhouette as she moved through the crowd, getting smaller and smaller. She wasn't looking back. She was framed by the garish party lights, but she didn't look like an accuser anymore. She looked like someone who had finally laid down a burden. She had spoken her truth, and in doing so she had freed herself from the prison of my silence. She was moving on, and I was left behind, trapped in the aftermath of my own failure. The music began to fade, or maybe I was just starting to hear it again. From my new perspective, the song changed to something slower, softer. The laughter seemed more subdued. The party was winding down, and beneath that fading music, beneath the weight of the shame and the regret, I felt a tiny fragile seed of something else. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was acceptance. The acceptance that this wound, this painful, truthful rupture might not be an ending. It might be the only possible beginning. It was the first honest moment between us and yours. And as much as it hurt, it was real, and something real, no matter how painful, could maybe, just maybe, be the foundation for something new. The music was perfect. I'd spent weeks curating the playlist, something sophisticated but upbeat, the kind of music that fills a room without demanding attention. The caterers moved through the crowd with trays of canapes, each one a tiny, expensive masterpiece. Everything was polished, every surface gleaming under the soft, warm light of the chandeliers. This party was my masterpiece, the annual holiday gathering for my firm's most important partners. It was more than a party. It was a statement, a demonstration of stability, of success, of a life perfectly assembled. My wife's laugh rang out from across the room. Practiced and bright, we were a team performing our roles flawlessly. And then there was Chloe, my daughter. She was leaning against the far wall, a glass of sparkling cider looking like a prop in her hands. 16 years old, and already more composed than most of the adults in the room. At least that's what I told myself. I saw the way she scrolled endlessly through her phone, the screen's blue glow stark contrast to the warm golden ambience I'd so carefully constructed. When my colleague Susan approached her to ask about school, I watched from a distance. Chloe's answers were polite, but they were monosyllabic, a quick smile that never reached her eyes, a slight nod before her gaze dropped back to her phone. I felt a flicker of irritation. This was an important night. Couldn't she make an effort just for a few hours? I told myself it was typical teenage moodiness, a phase. I was so busy being proud of the event, of the image we were projecting, that I missed the signs of a storm building right in front of me. Every forced smile from her felt like a personal victory for the facade, not a warning of its fragility. It happened near the end of the night. The party was winding down, the energy softening into a contented hum. A small group had gathered near the grand piano chatting lazily. Chloe was finally off her phone, standing with a few of the partner's younger kids. She was actually smiling at something one of them said. My heart lifted. This was at the perfect final note. I decided to draw her into the moment, to showcase our close-knit family one last time. I walked over, putting a genial hand on her shoulder. "Chloe, sweetheart," I said, my voice carrying just enough to be heard by the group. "Why don't you play something for us? You haven't played your recital piece in ages." Sure, everyone would love to hear it. The request felt innocent, a father's pride in his daughter's accomplishment. But the moment the words left my mouth, I felt her shoulder tense under my hand. The casual smile she'd had for the other kids vanished, replaced by a look of pure, undiluted panic. "No, Dad, not tonight," she mumbled, her eyes pleading with me, but I was too wrapped up in the performance to see it as anything but stubbornness. "Oh, come on," I pressed, giving her shoulder a little squeeze, playing to the small audience. "Don't be shy, it's a beautiful piece, be a dear." That's when the unraveling began. It wasn't slow, it was instantaneous. She shoved my hand off her shoulder, the movement so sudden and violent that I actually took a step back. "A dear," her voice was low at first, a dangerous tremor in it. "You want me to be a dear?" Then her volume exploded, cutting through the polite chatter like a physical blow. "You want me to perform like a trained monkey, to sit down and play some stupid song to prove what a perfect talented daughter you have? To prove what a perfect happy family this is?" The room fell into a stunned silence. You could hear the ice melting in someone's glass. Every single face was turned toward us, a sea of wide eyes and parted lips. I saw Susan's hand fly to her mouth. My boss Charles was staring, his expression unreadable. "Chloe, let's not do this here," I whispered, my face burning. I could feel the heat of 100 judgmental stares, each one feeling like a brand. "Why not? Why not? Here you love an audience, don't you?" Her voice was raw, cracking with a pain I had never truly heard before. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she made no move to wipe them away. They were a testament to her fury. "This is all for you, this whole stupid party, this whole perfect life. It's a lie. You're never here. You're always at work. Or you're planning the next party. Or you're too tired to even talk to me. You care more about what these people think." She swept her arm around the room. "Then you care about me. You have no idea what my life is like. You have no idea who I am. You ruined my life for this show." The words "you ruined my life" hung in the air, so absolute, so final. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. It was an oppressive weight of shared awkwardness. I saw a few people look down at their shoes. Others subtly reached for their phones, not to use them, but to have something to hold, something to look at. Other than the car crash happening in the middle of the living room, I stood there completely exposed, the perfect host the proud father revealed as a fraud in front of the very people I was trying to impress. The shame was a physical sickness, a churning in my gut that rose up into my throat. "Honey, please, we can talk about this upstairs," my wife said, her voice strained, appearing at my side. She tried to reach for Chloe, but it was too late. "There's nothing to talk about," Chloe spat. She looked from me to my wife, her expression a mixture of betrayal and triumph. "The show's over." And with that she turned and ran, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor before she slammed the front door shut. The vacuum she left behind was immense. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The party was dead. I was left standing there, the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. I had to face them. I had to say something. I forced a smile, a pathetic, trembling thing. "I am so sorry, everyone. Teenagers, you know." The attempt at a joke fell unbearably flat. The pity in their eyes was worse than the judgment. They started murmuring, making excuses, gathering coats. The exodus was swift and mercifully quiet. I stood by the door, shaking hands, accepting mumbled condolences, as if there had been a death under a lot of pressure. Someone said, "They all go through it," said another. Each word was a tiny needle. Then came the cleanup. My wife and I moved through the empty, silent house. The clinking of bottles as we cleared the bar was the only sound. Every half-empty wine glass, every discarded napkin was a relic of the disaster. I picked up a plate with a single untouched canap on it, tiny, perfect salmon bliny. I remember placing it on the menu with such care. Now it was just a reminder of the elaborate setup for a profound and public failure. The grand piano stood silent in the corner, its lid closed, a monument to my fatal error. The facade wasn't just cracked, it had been obliterated. The days that followed were a fog of silence. Chloe stayed in her room or at a friend's house. My wife and I moved around each other like ghosts. The unspoken accusation hanging between us, the humiliation replayed in my mind on a loop. Shocked faces, the slammed door, but slowly something else began to surface, something deeper and far more uncomfortable than shame. It was the truth. Her words, "You have no idea who I am," echoed louder than the insult. I started to really think. When was the last time I had asked her a question about her life and genuinely listened to the answer? When was the last time I had prioritized her school play over a client dinner? I had congratulated myself on providing a beautiful home, a prestigious school, lavish parties. But I had failed to provide the one thing that mattered: my presence, my genuine, attentive, unperformative presence. The public humiliation, as agonizing as it was, became a catalyst. It stripped away my ability to hide behind the image. There was no facade left to protect. My pride was already gone, trampled on the living room floor in front of my peers. And with it gone, all that was left was the stark reality of my failure. As a father, I realized that apologizing for the outburst, for embarrassing me, would be missing the point entirely. That would just be another act of selfishness. The apology needed to be for the years of neglect that led to it. I found her sitting on the swing in the backyard a week later. I didn't go out with a speech prepared. I just sat on the swing next to hers. The chains creaked in the quiet evening air. For a long time, neither of us spoke. "I'm sorry," I said. Finally, the words were simple, but they felt different. This time they weren't a tool to end a conflict, they were a statement of fact. She didn't look at me. "For which part?" "For all of it," I said, my voice low. "I'm sorry I asked you to play the piano, but more than that, I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you were just part of the show. I'm sorry for not being there. I'm sorry for choosing the party over you again. And again you were right about everything. I was a coward. I hid behind all that stuff. Because actually being your dad, the real messy part of it was hard, and I failed. She was quiet for so long I thought she might just get up and walk away. Then she spoke, her voice small. It really hurt, Dad. I know, I said. And for the first time, I think I really did. I know it did. And I am so sorry. It wasn't a magic fix. The road back was slow. It involved awkward dinners and conversations where I had to learn to listen. More than I spoke, it meant turning down work events to watch a movie she wanted to see. It meant being uncomfortable and vulnerable in a way the polished party host version of me never could have tolerated. But that public spectacle, that moment of utter humiliation, was the necessary earthquake that shattered the brittle foundation I'd built my life on. It allowed me to start building something real, something honest in its place. The shame of that night didn't disappear, but it transformed. It was no longer about what people thought of me. It became a private reminder of the cost of my choices and the humility required to choose differently. The silence the next morning was a physical weight. It was heavier than any blanket pressing down on the entire house. I woke up with it. This dense, suffocating quiet. My head was throbbing, but not from any hangover. It was from the echo of her words, still ringing clear as a bell. You're just a cowardly fool. I replayed the entire party in my mind, the bright lights, the laughing faces. But this time I wasn't watching it from my own defensive perspective. It was like I was seeing it through her eyes. I was looking for the clues, the moments of hurt I had been too self-involved to notice. The anger I'd felt initially, that knee-jerk reaction to lash out at being spoken to like that, it was just gone, drained away. What was left was a hollowed-out feeling. And beneath that, a desperate, urgent need to understand. Getting out of bed felt like a monumental task. The house was so still I didn't know if she was even here. I walked downstairs, each step careful, as if the floorboards might crack and shatter the fragile peace. I saw her car in the driveway. She was here. The relief was immediately followed by a fresh wave of anxiety. What do I do now? Do I pretend nothing happened? Do I wait for her to come to me? But waiting felt like the coward's way out. It felt like repeating the exact pattern she had accused me of. I stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker, and I knew I had to be the one to break this. I had to initiate something, anything. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone. Typing a long message felt wrong. It felt like hiding behind a screen. But a simple, open-ended invitation felt like all I could manage. I typed 3 words, "Can we talk?" I stared at them for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the send button. It felt like the most significant action I had taken in years. I pressed send. The wait for a response was agony. A minute later, my phone buzzed. 1 word, "Okay." I found her in the sunroom, curled up on the wicker sofa, staring out at the garden. She didn't look at me when I walked in. The air was thick with everything that was unsaid. I sat down in the chair opposite her, not too close. I remember consciously making the decision to keep my hands in my lap, to not fidget, to not fill the silence with empty words. I had to let her lead. I took a breath and said, "I'm listening." That was all, "I'm listening." And she started to talk. It wasn't an explosion this time. It was quiet, measured, and far more devastating. She started with the party, but then she went back, way back. She talked about the 5th grade ballet recital I'd missed because of a last-minute business trip. She described the dress her grandmother had bought her, how she'd practiced her routine for weeks. She talked about the look on my face when she told me she'd been accepted to college, a look she interpreted As disappointment instead of pride, she mentioned the time ID promised to help her fix her first car, and how ID spent the whole Saturday on the phone with work. Instead, it was a cascade of specific accumulated disappointments. Each one was a small stone, but together they had built a wall between us. The ruin my life wasn't about one thing. It was about 1,000 little abandonments. It was about my divorce from her mother, and how I'd been so wrapped up in my own grief and anger that ID failed to see hers. It was about the promises ID made about how things would be after the divorce, promises that life had made impossible to keep, but that ID never properly apologized for breaking. I had to physically bite my tongue to stop myself from interrupting. Every instinct was to explain, to justify. I had to provide for us. That trip was important for my career. I was struggling to, but I swallowed those words. They were excuses, and excuses were what had gotten us here. This wasn't about my reasons. It was about her experience. It was about the pain she had carried alone while I was oblivious. And then came the breakthrough. It wasn't something I said. It was a moment of pure empathy that washed over me. I saw her, truly saw her, not as my daughter who was angry with me, but as a person who had been deeply hurt by someone she was supposed to be able to trust. My eyes filled with tears. I didn't try to hide them. My voice was thick when I finally spoke. I am so sorry, I said. I hear you. And everything you're saying, it's true. I wasn't there for you. I let you down over and over again. And I am so sorry. It wasn't a defensive apology. It was an acknowledgement, a validation. I was finally seeing the mosaic of pain that she had been living with, and I was admitting that I had handed her most of the pieces. That was the moment the air in the room changed. The defensiveness dissolved. The blame shifted into something else, a shared understanding of a wound that needed to be tended to. We talked for hours that morning, and when we were done we were exhausted, but the silence between us was different. It was no longer heavy with resentment. It was quiet with the beginning of a new accord. We knew that I'm sorry was just the first step. Trust wasn't going to be rebuilt with words. It had to be built with action. We decided together to establish some new rules for our relationship. We agreed on a weekly dinner, just the two of us, with no phones allowed. We agreed that if one of us felt hurt or angry, we would say it directly instead of letting it fester. I promised to respect her autonomy more, to stop treating her like a child who needed my constant guidance. She asked me to be more present, to really be there when we were together. The following months were a slow, nonlinear process. There were setbacks, old habits die hard. There was a time I canceled one of our dinners for a work thing, and I saw the old shadow of disappointment cross her face. But this time I caught it. I acknowledged it right there. I said, I see that I'm doing it again. I'm sorry. Let's reschedule for tomorrow night, and he'll turn my phone off. It was a small moment, but it was a victory. It showed her that I was trying, that I was aware. The first genuine laugh we shared was about 2 months after the party. We were trying to assemble a new bookshelf for her apartment, and the instructions were completely wrong. We were getting more and more frustrated, and then we just looked at each other covered in misplaced screws and started laughing. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was deep, real, and it felt like a dam breaking. In that laughter I felt a glimmer of the connection I thought we'd lost forever. Now looking back, I see that the public breakdown at the party was the best thing that could have happened to us. It was a necessary explosion. It forced a confrontation that I had been avoiding for a decade. It shattered the fragile, polite facade we'd been living behind. and it allowed us to start building something real in its place. I learned that a strong relationship isn't one without conflict, it's one where you learn how to navigate the conflict together. It's about having the courage to face the hard, messy truths and to love each other enough to sit in the discomfort of honesty. Our bond now is stronger than it ever was before the rupture. There's a new honesty between us, a directness that is sometimes uncomfortable, but always respectful. We don't tiptoe around difficult topics anymore. We've built a foundation that can withstand disagreement because it's built on mutual respect and a proven track record of repair. The incident is no longer a source of shame for me, it's a landmark. It's the moment we both decided to stop being polite and start being real. And if I could offer any message to other parents feeling a distance growing, it would be this. Don't be afraid of the anger. Don't shy away from the confrontation. Sometimes the worst moments, the ones that feel like everything is falling apart, are actually the moments when you have the chance to build something new, something stronger and more beautiful than what was there before. It just requires love and a willingness to change. You know that feeling when your own home feels like a museum and you're the exhibit constantly being observed and corrected. That was my life every single day. Every choice I made, from the music I listened to, the clothes I wore, the friends I chose, it was all up for review. Her review. And the verdict was always the same: not good enough. Or her favorite phrase: I'm just worried about you. It was never a conversation, it was a dictate, a new rule handed down from on high. You can't go to that concert, the crowd will be rough. I don't like that boy, he seems like a bad influence. Why are you spending so much time on your art? It's not a real career path. It was like living in a beautifully decorated cage. The walls were painted with concern, but they were still walls. The real betrayal, the one that lit the fuse, happened 2 weeks before the party. The spring showcase I had a piece in it, a digital art animation I'd been working on for 6 months. It was my soul poured onto the screen, colors and shapes I'd used to talk about anxiety, about feeling trapped, about finding a small bright light in the dark. It was the most honest thing I'd ever made. I begged her to come. I told her it was important. She said she had a prior commitment, some work dinner she couldn't miss. I was devastated, but I forced myself to be understanding, the adult thing to do. Right, I went alone. I set up my laptop, my heart pounding, and when my piece played on the big screen in the dark auditorium, I swear I felt it in my bones. People clapped. My art teacher hugged me and said it was profound. For 3 minutes I felt seen, really truly seen. I got home buzzing with this fragile happiness, ready to maybe finally show her a part of me she might understand. I walked into the living room, and she was there on the couch watching TV. She looked up and smiled, her usual tired smile. How was your little art show, honey? Little, she called it, my little art show. And then, before I could even answer, she said, Mrs. Gable's daughter just got into Stanford Prem. Isn't that wonderful? That was at the showcase. My work, my moment. It was nothing less than nothing, just a distraction from the real goal, becoming the daughter she could brag about. I felt something inside me snap and go very, very quiet. The cage door didn't just lock that night, it vanished. I was already gone. So when the graduation party came round, it was the ultimate cruel joke. Our house was filled with people celebrating me. Congratulations, we're so proud of you, all directed at this perfect paper doll version of me she had constructed. I had to stand there in a dress she'd picked out and smile at her friends, smile at my relatives, smile until my face hurt. Every laugh that echoed through the house felt like an accusation. Every "you must be so happy" was a needle. I was screaming on the inside, screaming so loud I was surprised no one could hear it over the music. I was a ghost at my own funeral, watching everyone celebrate life I hadn't actually lived. Then came the breaking point. I was trapped near the punch bowl, listening to her talk to a group of her friends. She was in her element, the proud mother, and she started telling them about my future plans I had never agreed to, plans that involved a business degree at the local college, living at home to save money, a sensible, safe, suffocating path. She painted this picture of my life as if she were the artist, and I was just a blank canvas. And then she did it. She put her arm around me, pulled me close in this grip that looked like a hug, but felt like a restraint, and she said it to her friends with this condescending little laugh. Oh, she had her little phase with the computer art, but that's all behind her now. Time to get serious. Little phase behind me. The words didn't even hurt anymore. They were just the key turning the final lock. I felt this incredible calm wash over me. The noise of the party faded into a dull roar. I looked at her, right into her eyes, and I saw it. Had no idea what she had just done, no idea who I even was. I was backed into a corner with her arm as the barricade, and the only way out was through the silence, through the performance, through every unsaid word of the last 5 years. So I said it. My voice didn't shake. It was low and clear, and it cut through her conversation like glass. You ruined my life. The words hung in the air. Her smile froze. Her friends looked horrified. I wasn't sorry in that moment. It was the truest thing I had ever said. She had just ruined a party or a summer. She had ruined my ability to trust her, to feel safe with her, to believe that she loved me for who I actually was. Saying it out loud was like taking my first full breath in years. It was the most terrifying and empowering moment of my life. The immediate aftermath was a blur of stares and murmurs. I just turned and walked away, my whole body trembling with adrenaline. I went up to my room and locked the door, expecting her to come bursting in, yelling, screaming, punishing me for the public humiliation. I braced for the storm, but it didn't come. The house got quiet. The party ended much earlier than planned. I heard guests leaving quickly, their goodbyes awkward and hushed. The next few days were the strangest of my life. She was cold at first, silent treatment. The house was a glacier. I felt a sharp pang of guilt for causing a scene, for hurting her in front of everyone, but that guilt was quickly overwhelmed by this new fierce sense of empowerment. For the first time I had spoken my truth, however messy it was. The dynamic had shifted. She could no longer pretend everything was fine. And then something changed. The coldness thawed into something sadder, quieter. She started looking at me not with anger, but with a kind of confused hurt. 3 days after the party, she knocked on my door. Not a pound, a knock. She came in, and she didn't say anything for a long time. She just sat on the edge of my bed looking at my hands. And then she said in a voice so quiet I barely heard it, "Do you really believe that I ruined your life?" It wasn't an accusation. It was a question, a real genuine question. And that was the opening, that was the crack in the wall. We talked for hours. That night it was messy and painful, and we both cried. I told her about the showcase, about feeling invisible, about every time her worry felt like control. She didn't get defensive, not really. She listened, And she started to talk to about her own fears, about why she pushed for safe choices. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. It was the beginning of a real conversation, not a parent talking to a child, but one person finally starting to see another. That's the part I want other kids to understand. The outburst itself, it was a mess. I wish I could have found the words in a calmer moment, in a therapist's office, in a letter. But the truth is I tried. I tried the calm ways. I was just dismissed sometimes. The only way to shatter a pattern of being silenced is to make a sound so loud it can't be ignored. It's not about being dramatic for the sake of it. It's about survival. It's about reclaiming your voice from a system that has systematically muted it. If you're feeling that pressure building, that silent scream growing in your chest, try to talk first. Please try. Find a teacher, a counselor, write a letter. But if you've tried, and you're still not being heard, if you're drowning in the quiet, know this: your feelings are valid, your truth is real, your pain is not a phase. Advocating for your own emotional reality is the bravest thing you can do. It might be messy, it might be ugly, it might happen at a party and shock a room full of people, but that moment of messy, brutal honesty can be the catalyst for change. It can be the first step toward a relationship built on truth, not performance. And you deserve that. You deserve to be seen, not just managed. You deserve to have a life that feels like your own. The party itself was a pressure cooker. It's important to understand that it wasn't just a random location. You had all the ingredients for a perfect storm: high social pressure, the need to present a perfect family image to friends and relatives, a complete lack of privacy, meaning there was no safe, quiet corner for a real conversation to happen. Every interaction was on display under a microscope for a teenager especially. This is agonizing. Their social world is their entire reality, and any perceived criticism or embarrassment in front of peers feels catastrophic. This intersects perfectly with her developmental stage, adolescence. It's fundamentally about identity formation. It's a process of pulling away from the family unit to establish a separate, autonomous self. Her brain is wired for heightened emotional responses. The amygdala is highly active, while the prefrontal cortex, the center for rational judgment and impulse control, is still under construction. So a minor comment from a parent that might feel like a gentle suggestion to you lands for her as a profound invalidation of her feelings, her choices, her very identity. It feels like control, like you're trying to keep her from becoming her own person. The trigger itself is often the smallest thing: a comment about her clothes, her friends, a look you gave her across the room. It seems insignificant, but it's never about that one comment that's just the final straw. This is the concept of accumulated resentment. Think of it like a bucket over years, drops of disappointment, moments of feeling misunderstood, instances where she felt her emotions were dismissed or minimized, all fill this bucket. A missed school play because of work, a time you laughed at, a heartbreak she felt was real, promise broken. Each event is a drop. The bucket fills slowly, silently, and then at the party, with all that social pressure and emotional intensity, that one small comment makes the bucket overflow. The outburst isn't about the drop, it's about the entire bucket. Now let's deconstruct the outburst itself. The words "you ruined my life" are shocking. They feel like a personal attack, a final judgment on your entire career as a parent. But it's critical to recognize this as hyperbole. It is not a factual statement, it is an expression of profound current unhappiness in that moment. Her life feels ruined because the pain is so overwhelming she cannot see a future beyond it. She is articulating a feeling, not a reality. The function of this outburst is communication. It's a desperate last-ditch attempt to make you see the depth of her pain when quieter, more subtle methods of communication have failed. Sighs, the closed doors, the muttered finesse. Psyche escalates. It's like turning up the volume on a stereo because you think the person in the next room can't hear you. She needs you to hear her. And this is the only volume that feels powerful enough to break through the public setting. Is crucial. It amplifies everything for her. Your comment, however minor, felt like a public humiliation. It reinforced a feeling of being an extension of you rather than her own person, right in front of her peers. For you, the public nature of the attack induces a profound sense of shame and humiliation. Your own social identity as a competent, loving parent is shattered in front of an audience. This dual shame, hers from feeling controlled, yours from being exposed, creates a feedback loop that escalates the situation rapidly. The perceived betrayal is deeper because it happened in public. The aftermath is where the real work begins. There is a critical window after a rupture like this. The initial response sets the tone for everything that follows. The natural, instinctual reaction is to defend yourself, to fire back, to say, "How can you say that after all I've done for you?" or to minimize your being dramatic. Calm down. This reaction, while understandable, is a disaster. It confirms her deepest fear that you do not see her, that you cannot handle her big feelings, that her pain is an inconvenience to you. The goal must be to move from reaction to reflection. This is incredibly difficult. It requires you to set your own hurt and shock aside momentarily. You have to see beyond the angry words to the wounded person speaking them. What is the underlying need? It is almost always a need for validation, for feeling heard, for autonomy, for unconditional love that isn't contingent on being good or easy to handle. Validation is the first and most powerful step. This does not mean you agree with her statement that you ruined her life. It means you acknowledge the validity of her feelings. It sounds like, "I can hear how incredibly angry you are right now," or "it sounds like you are feeling so hurt and misunderstood." This simple act of reflecting the emotion without judgment or correction is disarming. It tells her that her emotional world is real and acceptable to you. It begins to de-escalate the situation because the fight for recognition is starting to be won. This leads into the process of coagulation. Her nervous system is in a state of high alert, flooded with stress hormones. Your calm, regulated presence can actually help bring her nervous system back to a baseline. Your steady voice, your non-defensive posture, your willingness to listen, these are signals of safety. This is the foundation of rebuilding a secure attachment. It proves that the relationship is strong enough to withstand conflict, that your love is not withdrawn when things get messy. Now, for practical steps after the initial de-escalation, you need to initiate a calm conversation. This should happen later, when everyone has had time to cool down. Use "I feel" statements to express your own experience without blame. "I felt shocked and hurt when I heard those words, and I am trying to understand what led to that moment." This models healthy communication. Establishing new boundaries and communication rules is essential. You might say, "I want us to be able to talk about hard things in the future. If I say something that hurts you, can we agree to try and talk about it privately first? And I will do my best to listen without getting defensive." This isn't about punishing the outburst, it's about building a better system for the future. Recognize when you need help if these conversations keep going in circles, or if the resentment feels too deep to navigate alone. Family therapy is a sign of strength, not failure. A therapist can provide a neutral space and teach specific communication skills. Finally, reframe this rupture. It is not the end of your relationship, it is a painful but potent opportunity. These moments of raw honesty, however brutal, strip away the pretense. They create an opening for a more authentic relationship, one built not on perfect harmony, but on the capacity to repair, to understand, and to love each other through the difficult, messy truth. The goal isn't to avoid conflict. The goal is to learn how to navigate it together, so that on the other side the connection is stronger and more real than it ever was before. The restaurant was loud, that trendy kind of loud, all polished concrete and exposed ductwork with music just a little too high to comfortably talk over. We were celebrating her 16th birthday. She'd picked the place. Her friends were there, a half dozen of them, all scrolling and snapping and laughing in their own little bubble at the other end of the long table. I was just happy to be included. I was trying so hard to be the cool dad. The argument started over something stupid. Her curfew ID suggested a time. She'd pushed back, her voice getting that sharp edge. I'd been hearing more and more. I tried to make a joke of it, a bad joke, the kind that lands with a thought. I said something like, well, if you're going to be out that late, I'll have to start charging you rent. It was meant to be light. It wasn't. Her face changed. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a deep, profound hurt. And her voice, it cut right through the music. You don't get to joke about this. You don't get to joke about anything. You weren't even here for the last 3 birthdays. Why do you suddenly care so much about this one? The table went quiet. Her friends stopped talking. I saw the glances, and then I saw it, the subtle shift. A phone held by one of her friends was angled not at her, but at me, then another. The little red recording light was like a tiny accusing eye. My mouth went dry. This wasn't a private moment anymore. It was content. I tried to de-escalate. Honey, not here. Let's talk about this at home. But the damage was done. The public nature of it, the audience, it fueled her. It gave her a platform she wouldn't have had in our kitchen. You always say that. Not here, not now. When is the right time, Dad? When it's convenient for you, when no one's watching. Her words were clear and loud. The music seemed to have been turned down, or maybe I just couldn't hear it anymore. All I could hear was her and the absolute silence of everyone else listening. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. So tired of you pretending to be a father, pretending to care. You're a fraud. And with that she grabbed her purse and walked out. The restaurant door swung shut behind her. The silence she left was heavier than any noise. I sat there for a second, stunned. I looked at her friends. They were already looking down at their phones, typing furiously. The one who had been recording didn't even meet my eye. She just slipped her phone into her pocket. I paid the bill, my hands shaking. I mumbled an apology to the group and left in the car. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat in the dark. And then, against every better instinct, I opened my phone. I went to the app I knew her friends used. Most one. Didn't even have to search. It was right there on the For You page. A video. The thumbnail was a close-up of my face mid-flinch. The caption was brutal. When your absentee dad tries to parent at your birthday dinner. My thumb hovered over it. I didn't want to click, but I had to. The video was short, maybe 30 seconds. It started right after my stupid joke. It captured her entire speech, her voice trembling but strong. It ended on my stunned silence. As she walked out, it was perfectly framed to make me look like the villain, and it had already been viewed 20,000 times. The comments were a torrent, a flood of absolute judgment from complete strangers. Deadbeat dad alert, she ate him up and left no crumbs. Queen behavior, protect this girl at all costs. Who does he think he is? Another father failing his daughter. I scrolled through hundreds of them. Each one was like a small punch. Some were offering her support, others were dissecting my posture, my expression, diagnosing me as a narcissist. There were a few voices buried deep saying this is a private family matter, but they were quickly drowned out. I felt naked, exposed to the world. My failure, my deepest shame, was now public entertainment. My daughter's pain was a meme, and I was the punchline. I drove home in a daze. The house was dark and quiet. When I got in, her bedroom door was shut. I went to my study and just stared at the computer screen. I felt this overwhelming urge to respond, to write a comment, to make a video of my own, to explain my side. I was traveling for work. Those 3 years I was building a future for us. It wasn't abandonment, it was sacrifice. But I knew with a sickening certainty that anything I said would just add fuel to the fire. It would be seen as defensive, as gaslighting. There was no winning in that digital arena. The narrative was set. The next day was worse. The video had been picked up by a bigger account, a T-page. The view count was in the hundreds of thousands. My phone started buzzing. A few friends had seen it. My sister called, her voice tight with concern. What is this, Mark? What's going on? I had no answer. I felt paralyzed. The public scrutiny was a cage. I couldn't approach my daughter. I couldn't begin to fix this because every potential action was now filtered through how it would play online. Would it look genuine? Would people think I was only apologizing because I got caught? I saw her at breakfast. She looked exhausted. She wouldn't look at me. Her phone was on the table, buzzing constantly. She'd see a notification, and a tiny complicated flicker would cross her face, part validation, part horror. I realized then that she was trapped in it too. She had unleashed this, but she couldn't control it any more than I could. Her pain was now public property. That was the moment something shifted in me. The anger at the invasion, the shame, the exposure, it all condensed into one clear thought. This wasn't about the internet anymore. This was about her. This was about the look on her face at breakfast. The storm was online, but the damage was here in this quiet kitchen. The only way out was to turn away from the screen and turn toward her. I waited until the evening. I knocked on her door. I heard a faint whatever. I went in. She was on her bed, surrounded by textbooks. She wasn't reading. Her phone was face down beside her. I didn't start with an apology. I just sat in the chair by her desk. I saw the video. I said. My voice was quiet. She flinched like she was expecting me to yell. So I said, I can't imagine how that feels, to have that many people talking about you, to have your pain be public. She was silent for a long time. She picked at thread on her comforter. Some of the comments are nice, she said softly. They get it, but a lot of them aren't, I said. And they're talking about things they know nothing about. They don't know me. They don't know us. That's the point, she said, her voice gaining a little strength. They saw what you did. They saw the truth. Maybe they saw a piece of it, I said, a 30-second piece, but they didn't see the years before. They didn't see me missing you every day I was away. They didn't see me thinking I was doing the right thing. I took a deep breath, and they definitely don't get to decide what happens next. That's up to you. I told her I was logging off, not just from the apps, but from the entire drama. I said that if we tried to fix this by worrying about what people online thought, would fail. We had to have the conversation the video was about but without an audience, and we did. It was the hardest conversation of my life. We talked for hours. I didn't defend my actions. I listened. I heard about the birthday she spent waiting for a phone call that came too late. I heard about the school events she stopped telling me about because I always said I couldn't make it. I heard the quiet accumulated resentment that had been building for years. The video was just the explosion. The pressure had been there all along. I apologize. Not I'm sorry you feel that way. Apology, a real specific gut-wrenching apology for my absence, for my emotional distance, for failing her. About a week later she came to me. The video had finally started to die down, replaced by the next piece of internet drama. She said, I think we should make a video. I was shocked. Why would we do that? Not for them, she said, for us to take it back, to say our piece, and maybe to help someone else. If we just disappear, the story ends with me yelling and you being the bad guy. That's not the whole story anymore. We talked about it for a long time. We decided that if we did it, we would do it together. We wrote a script, well, more of an outline. We sat side by side at the kitchen table and recorded a short video. She spoke first. She talked about how anger online is easy, but reconciliation is hard. She said that posting the video felt powerful in the moment, but it also made a private wound public. Then I spoke. I looked right at the camera, and I said I failed my daughter, not in the way the comments section thinks, but in a slower, quieter way, by not being present, by not listening. The internet was quick to call me a coward, and they were right, but the bravest thing I've ever done is to finally sit down and hear her. We didn't post it right away. We sat with it for a day. We asked each other if we were sure. In the end, we decided we were. We posted it. The response was different, quieter. There were still nasty comments, of course, but there were also comments from parents saying it made them think, from kids saying they wished their parents would listen like that. It didn't go viral. It wasn't supposed to. It was just our statement, our way of closing the loop. The whole experience taught me something about this world we live in now. A moment of pain can be captured and amplified into a global spectacle in an instant. There's no undo button. But that doesn't mean you lose your agency. The most powerful thing you can do is to turn away from the noise and focus on the quiet, difficult work of repair. The internet is a permanent record of our meltdowns, but it doesn't get to write the ending. We write that ourselves offline in the quiet spaces between us. The story isn't what happened in the restaurant. The story is what we chose to do after the cameras were off. It was a beautiful party by our standards. My sister's house full of the food and the sounds of home, the scent of saffron and lamb, the familiar melodies from the old country playing softly under the loud, happy noise of family. All our people were there, aunts and uncles, cousins, old family friends who have known my daughter since she was a baby, balanced on my hip. To them, this was a celebration, a gathering that proved we were still us, even here so far from the soil where our roots were planted. And I was so proud of the home we had made, proud of my daughter standing there so tall and beautiful to our guests. She was the perfect picture of a successful immigrant's child, polite, educated, speaking our language with only a slight American accent. She moved through the room, carrying the tea tray, smiling when she was spoken to. I saw the approving nods, the quiet comments to my wife about how well we had raised her. It was a kind of currency, this respect. It was everything we had worked for. But I saw the tightness in her smile, the way her eyes would drift to the window, to the quiet American street outside, so different from the noisy, warm chaos of our gathering. I saw how her shoulders relaxed only when she thought no one was looking. To me, to our family, this party was a reaffirmation of who we are. To her, I was beginning to understand. It felt like a performance, a role she had been cast in since birth, and the costume was starting to itch. The divide was right there in the middle of the room. It was in the way my uncle told a story, and everyone listened, not because the story was new, but because his age demanded our attention. It was an unspoken rule that a child, even a 22-year-old child, does not contradict, does not voice an opinion unless it is asked for. Harmony, that is the goal. The family's harmony, the collective face we present to the world, is more important than any single person's fleeting feeling. I was raised on that belief. It is the bedrock of my life. But she was raised here. She was taught in school that her opinion matters, that she should speak up, that her individual truth is the most important thing she owns. I thought we could balance both. I thought my way was the right way, the only way to keep her safe, to keep us whole. The outburst didn't come from nowhere. It was a tremor that had been building for years. It was in the small disagreements about curfews, about her clothes, about the friends she chose who didn't understand our ways. It was in the way she would say, "But Dad, this is America." And I would reply, "But in this house we are still us." I thought I was protecting her. She thought I was building a prison. It happened near the end of the night. My cousin was telling a story about his son, about how the boy had chosen to study art instead of engineering. A foolish choice, he said, but he laughed as he said it, a gentle, chiding laugh that everyone joined in on. It was meant to be light, a shared understanding of a parent's mild disappointment. But my daughter was standing right there, and she spoke. Her voice was quiet at first, but it cut through the laughter. "Maybe he's happy," she said. "Isn't that what matters?" The room got a little quiet. My cousin smiled a bit condescendingly. "Happiness comes from security, from providing for your family. An artist, how will he provide?" And then she said it. Her voice got louder, sharper. "You can't decide what happiness is for someone else. That's what's wrong with all of this. You all have this script, and if you don't follow it, you're shamed for it." My face burned. I had to step in to smooth it over, to restore the harmony. I put a hand on her arm. "Sweetheart, that's enough as just talking." I tried to make my voice soft, but it came out as a command, a dismissal. And that's when she turned on me. The look in her eyes wasn't just anger, it was a deep, profound hurt, and her voice trembled, but it was clear as glass. "You're the worst one, Dad. You pretend to understand, but you don't. You just want me to play my part. You care more about what these people think than you care about me. You have ruined my life with your rules and your shame." The room didn't just get quiet, it became a vacuum. The air was sucked right out of it. "You ruined my life. In our culture there is no greater failure for a parent. There is no more shaming phrase a child can utter. It is the ultimate indictment, a public declaration that all our sacrifices, all our hard work, all our love has been for nothing. It is the nuclear option." I felt every eye on me. I saw the shock on my sister's face, the pity in my uncle's eyes. I saw my wife look away, her own shame too great to bear. My daughter had not just yelled at me, she had torn down the entire thought of our family in front of the very community that gave that thought its value. The respect I had accumulated over 30 years of hard work evaporated in a single moment. I was no longer the successful immigrant father. I was the man who could not control his own child, a fool. And she saw it all on my face. She saw the shame, the devastation, and I think in that moment she understood the depth of the cultural chasm she had just leaped across. This wasn't just a daughter being angry at her father, this was, in the eyes of everyone in that room, a profound act of disrespect that reverberated through the entire family structure. But from her perspective, from the American world she lived in every day, she was finally speaking her truth. She was being honest. She was breaking free from what she saw as stifling, outdated traditions. She didn't see the collapse of a family's honor. She saw the expression of her individual pain. In the days that followed, the silence in our house was heavier than any punishment. The phone calls came, my sister, my mother back home, my cousins. Their words were meant to be comforting. She is young. She doesn't understand. She has been corrupted by this country. They all reinforce my sense of failure, but they also reinforced the old rules. They told me I needed to be stricter to reassert my authority. That was the path back to harmony according to the script I knew, but that script felt hollow now, torn and useless. My conflict wasn't just with my daughter anymore, it was inside me, a civil war between cultural duty and a father's love. My duty, everything I was taught, told me to demand an apology, to make her understand the gravity of her disrespect, to make her kneel before the altar of family honor. But my love for her made me look at her pain, really look at it. Was she truly corrupted, or was she just different? Had I been so busy building a shield against the new world that I had built a wall between me and my own child? I had to try to understand her world. I started to see that for her, respect wasn't about obedience and silence. Respect was about listening. It was about valuing her thoughts enough to hear them even when they challenged my own. It was about trusting her enough to let her make her own choices, even if they were choices I wouldn't make. Her desire for individuality wasn't a rejection of me, it was a desire to be seen for who she truly was, not just for who I needed her to be. For the sake of our family's image, bridging this gap felt like building a bridge across an ocean with my bare hands. The old definition of respect was so ingrained in me, it was the backbone of my identity. To redefine it felt like a betrayal of my own parents, of my entire history. But what was the alternative? To lose my daughter forever, to have a relationship based on fear and resentment, hidden behind a mask of polite harmony that wasn't harmony, that was a lie. The middle ground is not a comfortable place. It's a messy, uncertain space between two worlds. It means that sometimes I have to bite my tongue when she makes a decision I disagree with. It means accepting that her version of success might look nothing like mine. But it also means she has had to meet me halfway. She has had to learn that our traditions are not just about control, they are about connection. They are the stories and the flavors and the rhythms that tie her to a long line of people who loved her before she was even born. She has had to learn that speaking her truth can be done with kindness. That honesty does not have to be a weapon. That terrible night, that public shaming, forced a conversation we had been avoiding for 20 years. It forced us to talk about identity, about what it means to be both an American and a child of our homeland. It was a painful, brutal way to start, but it was necessary. The silence was broken, and what came out was ugly and real. But it was a start. Our family culture now is a hybrid. It's imperfect. Some days we get it wrong, but we are trying. We celebrate American holidays with the same enthusiasm as we celebrate our own. We speak a mix of English and our language at the dinner table. The conversation, a fluid thing that belongs to both of us. Respect in our house now means I listen to her opinions And she listens to the wisdom in my stories. It is a mutual understanding earned through difficult work. The message I have learned through all this pain is that love is stronger than any cultural script. The scripts we inherit are maps, but they are not. The territory is the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of the people we love. Love requires us to be brave enough to put the map down sometimes and just look at the person standing in front of us. It requires us to listen, to adapt, to admit that our way is not the only way. My daughter's American outburst didn't just shame our family, it shattered the old rigid definition of our family. And from those broken pieces, we are slowly, carefully building something new, something that honors the past, without being a prisoner to it, something that has room for both her truth and my history. It is a new definition of family born from a clash but forged in love. I spent weeks planning this party. It wasn't just a graduation celebration, it was a statement. I wanted the house to look perfect, the food to be exquisite, the music to be just the right volume. I wanted our friends and family to see us, to see her, and to think what a happy family they made it through. I wanted to project an image of a happy, unified family, a testament to our resilience. I hung the banners and arranged the photos of her growing up, each one a tiny flag planted in the soil of a life I desperately wanted to believe was whole, but standing here watching her smile politely at a distant cousin. I feel the lie of it all. The laughter from the backyard sounds bright and hollow like coins rattling in an empty can. Everyone is here for her, for this milestone. But I know the real guest of honor is the thing we never talk about. It's the hidden fracture, the foundational crack I caused 13 years ago, the one I've spent over a decade trying to paper over with normalcy. Her behavior is a constant, subtle reminder, the way she stiffens slightly when I put a hand on her shoulder, the way her laughter cuts off a little too quickly when I enter the room. It's there in the careful politeness, the emotional distance she maintains like a security fence. I had this foolish, desperate hope that time had healed the wound up the years of school plays and Christmas mornings and driving her to soccer practice had built a new layer over the old scar tissue. I thought this party, this public declaration of our success, would finally cement that healing. But seeing her now, beautiful, poised young woman who feels a million miles away from me, even in our own crowded garden, I know the party proves otherwise. The fracture isn't healed, it's just been waiting. The conversation started with an old friend of mine, Sarah. She was cooing over the graduation photos. "Oh, she looks just like you did at that age," Sarah said. And I beamed with a pride that was only half feigned. "It's amazing," she continued to think. "You raised her all on your own here. You built such a wonderful life in this town." And I nodded, falling into the familiar script. It wasn't always easy, but we managed. This town has been so good to us. It was a rote response, a line I'd delivered 100 times. But my daughter was standing right there, holding a plate of food. She'd been listening, and my casual, thoughtless comment, my agreement that this life here was the only life that mattered, was the final straw. The party conversation had inadvertently touched the hidden subject, the one subject I had declared off limits for over a decade. Her face, which had been a mask of pleasant detachment, just collapsed. She didn't yell, not at first. Her voice was low, but it cut through the chatter and music with terrifying clarity. "Managed," she said, and everyone nearby went quiet. "You call this managing?" She looked from me to Sarah and back again, her eyes wide with a pain I hadn't seen in years. You think this down, this whole life is a success story. Her breath hitched. You ruined my life when you dragged me away from our home. You took me away from my dad, from my friends, from everything I knew. And you never once asked me what I wanted. You never even talked about it. You just decided, and I had to live with it. You ruined my life the day we left. The silence that fell on us was absolute. The backyard full of people became a frozen to blow. My shock was a physical blow. I knew she was hurt all those years ago. Of course I did. She was 7. It was a difficult transition. But I had no idea the depth of the lingering hurt. I thought it was a childhood sadness, something shed, outgrown. I never realized it had festered into this core belief that I had destroyed her happiness. The public setting made the revelation inescapable. There was no pretending she hadn't said it. There was no room for me to deflect or minimize. The truth was out, hanging in the air for everyone to see. I reached for her arm. Honey, please, not here, I whispered. But she pulled away sharply. Her anger was a shield, and behind it I saw the raw grief of that little girl I'd put in the car all those years ago. The necessity of finally discussing the long-avoided topic was upon us, and there was no running from it now. I had to face it. I led her inside, away from the staring eyes, into the sudden quiet of the living room. The party sounds became a distant, muffled hum. We stood facing each other. The gulf between us felt wider than the room. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had avoided for 13 years. When we moved away, I began, my voice trembling. When I made you leave your dad and your friends and your school, I need you to know why I did it. I wasn't going to give excuses. I was taking full responsibility for the impact of my decisions. It wasn't to hurt you. I was so young and I was so scared. Your father and we were poisoning each other, the fighting, the silence. It was a terrible environment for a child. I thought I was saving you. I thought a fresh start, just the two of us, was the only way. She was crying now, silent tears tracing paths through her carefully applied makeup. You never asked me, she repeated, her voice breaking. You just packed my things. You told me we were going on a trip, and then we never went back. I lost my dad. He tried for a while, but the distance, it was too hard for him. He gave up, and I lost my friends. I had to start over in a town where I didn't know anyone, and you were always working, always so tired. I was so lonely. I spent years feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. She was expressing the full extent of her grief, her anger, and her sense of loss. It was a flood that had been held back for most of her life. Every birthday party I went to where I was the new girl, every time I saw father and daughter together, every single happy memory from before we left, it all just reminded me of what I lost. And you never talked about it. You acted like it never happened, like my old life never existed. You pretended everything was fine, and you made me pretend too. I felt her words sink into me, each one a confirmation of my failure. She was right. I had been a coward. I couldn't handle my own guilt, my own grief over the failed marriage and the life I'd left behind. So I buried it, and in doing so I forced her to bury her pain too. I made her loneliness invisible. This was the beginning of a genuine mourning process, not just for her but for me as well. We were finally mourning the family we lost, the stability that shattered, the childhood that was interrupted. I am so sorry, I said, and for the first time the apology felt real, weighted with the understanding of what I was actually apologizing not for the move itself, but for the silence that followed, for the emotional abandonment, for refusing to acknowledge her pain because I was too fragile to face my own. I was so wrong to never talk about it with you. I was trying to protect you, but I was really just protecting myself. I am so sorry for the loneliness I caused you. We stood there for a long time crying together in the quiet living room. The party outside continued without us. A phantom celebration of a happiness we hadn't yet earned. I knew then that the past couldn't be changed. I couldn't give her back those years. I couldn't force her father to have been more present. That chapter was written, and its ink was permanent. But I understood with a clarity that was both painful and liberating that its hold on the present could be loosened. The rest of the party was a blur. People left, offering awkward goodbyes. We cleaned up in a kind of shared weary silence, but it was a different silence now. It wasn't the silence of avoidance, it was the quiet after a storm, a space for the air to clear. The incident was a painful but essential cleansing. It was like lancing a wound that had been infected for years. The poison was finally out. In the days that followed, we started talking, really talking. We looked at old photos from before the move, and I let her ask questions. I told her stories about her father that I'd been too bitter to share. We cried, and we even laughed a little at some of the memories. We were creating a new honest narrative for our past, one that acknowledged the pain instead of hiding from it. We were creating new positive memories to slowly, carefully overwrite the pain of the old ones. It's a slow process. The hurt doesn't vanish overnight, but the facade is gone. There's a raw, honest space between us now where the truth can live. That party, that terrible, beautiful, awful moment of public eruption, was the catalyst. It was the scream that our secret needed to finally lose its power over us. Some secrets fester in the dark. They grow and distort until they become monsters. The only way to defeat them is to drag them kicking and screaming into the light. And that's what she did. She was brave enough for both of us, and she showed me that the only way to write a new chapter is to first acknowledge the painful words in the one before.